It was never a question, really. It was inevitable that I'd eventually overthrow them. I just didn't know it would be so soon. And I was so young as well, barely 12 at the time. I knew she'd been at the house before. My parents' parties would invite all sorts. She was always interested in the latest spell I knew, tolerated it when I would talk her ear off about illusions. She can't have been that old herself. The adults, at least, weren't treating her like one. I do not know if her parents had been invited, or if she had just ended up on the guest list herself. Although she did keep me entertained during parties, maybe my parents invited her to act as a short-term nanny. Regardless as to why she was there, she always told me stories. They were off-color and would frequently elicit stares from my parents or other guests, but they were the highlight of my week, the rest of it being filled with pointless dress-up for events and four-sentence conversations with my parents. She would tell me about ages past, and the feats of magic that were accomplished there. Wars fought over artifacts, machines that could power spells beyond 9th level, tales of betrayal and deceit, often coupled with those of love and virtues. If she was missing from a party and I dared ask my parents where she was, they would say they didn't know. Maybe I don't thank her enough for how much she helped me develop my sense of self-worth. She would ask me, "What did you do this week?" And at first, I didn't know how to respond. I didn't do much of anything. My parents did, and I reacted. I went along. My siblings didn't, and would be sent to their rooms for not being proper nobles. I found it easier to just let things happen and not interfere too much. I told her where I had gone that week, what I had eaten. That wasn't what she wanted to hear. She wanted to know what I had done with my agency. I wanted to impress her, so I started doing things. I made myself breakfast, sorted my own clothes. Then she asked me what I felt. I'd only been asked that before, after falling and hurting myself. She pushed me to be independent, and so I started to develop my own ego, hidden under the proper demeanor I showed my parents. I think it was after Sam had been locked in his room for a week for not eating his food in the proper order that I started to feel disdain for the first time, both for my parents' brutal punishments and for Sam's inability to have class. I didn't understand what I felt to my parents at the time, so I told her how I felt about Sam, and she asked, "What did you do about it?" Oh, that twinge of embarrassment that I felt when Sam would make a mistake in public. I could stop it. I made it look like an accident. I had class. I knew how not to get involved. Sam had to stay home with a broken leg, while the rest of us went out to meet a bunch of serfs. And I relaxed. I didn't have to worry about Sam speaking out of term or not sitting properly. It was easy to keep the others in line. I would just talk to them, bribe them, coerce them. I don't think my parents ever noticed the balance of power shifting. We would still do as told. I never let any of my siblings talk to her. I wouldn't want them to start thinking like me. My arcane abilities started to grow too. In tandem, so did the disdain for my parents. They were ineffective and needlessly cruel in the wrong places. They inspired hate rather than fear with their cruelty. I didn't understand why I felt stuck. I was far better off than any peasant. My parents gave me everything I had. I was not allowed to dislike them or treat them in the same way I did my siblings. She broke that idea. She gave me permission to hate them. They will die one day. Will you still be beholden to them then? Will you still fear them? At 13.5, I stood on the main stairway of our house, one step up so that the blood wouldn't dirty my skirt. The bodies of Sam and my parents were still warm on the ground. The help and my siblings were still shell-shocked, staring at their own hands and implements of murder when guards stormed the manor. I had been sleeping, recovering from my illness the whole time. I wish the others didn't have to be hung, but an example was necessary. I played the game, of course. I didn't host another party for a few months, pretending to grieve, even though I was desperate to tell her how I had pulled it off. When the guests returned, they were unsettled by a young teenager now taking her place as the lady of the land. Not that others hadn't tried to take power in the meantime. And she was the most excited I had ever seen her. I didn't get as much time to talk to her, having to entertain guests and all. But I invited her to stay the week. There were plenty of empty rooms, after all.